Okay. So you really want to know, huh? Fine. I'm going to start by telling you this. And this is important, so listen up. Your entire life, this one and many others, you've been a god who uses its absolute power to make yourself powerless. Entire cultures, especially this one, have all been afraid of their weaknesses, supposedly, when in reality, they've all been afraid of their power. This goes beyond the matrix of reality. This is something much deeper than that. This is eternal. This is fully realizing your consciousness. This is infinite. This is evolution. This is our divine right.
Welcome, everybody, to the podcast, the Bootsy Greencast. That's right. How much have I saved on SEO? I don't know, but it's a lot of crypto coin. Today, I'm very, very pleased to have a wonderful guest on the show, the unfuckwithable coach. I have Arianna Zabriskie, and we've been talking for quite a while, actually, before this show, just having a lovely conversation. Really, really excited to have her on the show. I'm going to share her website right now so you can see it. Soul Shining. Check this out. Really excited. She is a professional, and she also is very down to earth and has a great story. I'm really excited. Now we're going to be saying the word unfuckwithable a lot, so I want to thank my content safe sponsors real quick, just in case, that's all of a sudden a bad word now or something like that. Arianna, you are lovely. I'm really excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Definitely a treat.
Yeah, we've been talking about a lot of cool stuff, and I just really want to kind of dive deeper into what you've been doing. I know you've done a lot of work. You work as a professional and as a and like clinically, and so a lot of the stuff that I'm super curious about, and I know all this woo-woo mystery sort of stuff about, you have a much more practical and sort of scientific, practical application with a lot of this stuff. So I think that's really cool how the worlds sort of collide like that. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your background and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So my clinical training, I have my master's in marriage family therapy, and my specialization in the therapy umbrella is addiction. So I work at a rehabilitation center in downtown San Diego as a clinician. And I've been doing that for a couple of years. And then I'm now a little more than halfway done with my doctoral program in clinical psychology. So I'm working towards my PsyD, doctorate of psychology. And there are many, many things I'd love to do with that. But what I'm already doing with my training thus far is I am also doing coaching on the side. So I title myself a forgiveness coach, which is kind of tied into my personal journey and story. And then I am also training coaches on mental health, and that is the Unfuckwithable Coaches program, because you cannot be an unfuckwithable coach if you are not crystal clear on how to differentiate when a client might need more support in certain areas, or less encouragement, more encouragement, whatever might be coming up with that client. It's really important to know about mental health, at least have a basis foundation, particularly in trauma, being trauma informed, to be a more efficient coach.
Well, that's awesome. It seems like something that you're very passionate and knowledgeable about. So I think that's really amazing and really giving to, very, generous of you to go into such a profession, and all the letters that you have. I think that's really cool.
I like those letters too.
I have a stripper name. I have a stripper name. You have letters. So, it's cool,
Well, I definitely want to get on the stripper name bandwagon for sure. Go King. Yes. That's what we determined mine would be.
Go King. That's right. I think that's great. It's amazing how well that formula works. For people out there who don't know how I generated my name, they should create a website that's like stripper name generator or something like that.
Yes,
it's just your first animal that you ever had or pet, and then the street you grew up on. And, I think there's some leeway with it too, right? Like if there's like one street or one pet that maybe came later and it sounds better, then go ahead and do it. Like why don't sell yourself short? You don't have to totally stick to the standards of stripper name rules, but have fun with it, play with it a little bit. Well, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about what brought you into wanting to work with people like this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say this is probably a response that maybe a lot of people who go into the healing work can resonate with. But what initially sparked my interest growing up was being a caregiver to my own parents, like being a huge support system for my mom growing up. I was maybe what one would identify as a parentified child. And I kind of carried that with me my whole life. I was always that kid that like hung out at the adult table for a really long time after dinner, listening to all the conversations, like taking it all in like a sponge, And I often remember being bored about like with what other kids my age were talking about and really just wanting to hear what all the grownups were talking about. And in particular, my grandfather was a researcher and a doctor. And I would just sit there and just absorb all of the stories that he had, like just about his research, about his science, about psychology, about everything. I mean, that's really initially where it started. And then I swayed from my path. I swayed from it. I worked in international education, and I had a really great job in being able to travel all over the world. I've been to Morocco 6 times, like all over Morocco,
Cool.
Spain, France. Yeah, I've traveled a ton with my previous job, which was awesome. And, I think that actually was such a pivotal moment because when you're in like a really great job and you're loving it and you're like, this is so awesome, but something is still missing. Like that's actually, I think, a really important cue. It's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you. It's that like, listen to your soul, and that's actually a segue into how I think about mental health is actually, I take a more psycho-spiritual approach to mental health. So I've been really getting into Carl Jung lately. I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung. Carl Jung trained under Freud, and he really kind of branched off and really brought on this psycho-spiritual approach. He talked a lot about energy, a lot about the soul and the collective unconscious. And that's what I'm finding really resonates with me in how I perceive mental illness and how I perceive the journey of the human experience. Is we all have these moments where we can ignore the soul or listen to the soul, and each can have very different outcomes, and each can lead us into the potentially greatest version of ourselves. So I knew that I was missing something, and I listened to it, and I went back to school and I was like, wow, this is so great. And I was able to merge kind of all of it together. The company I was working for ended up hiring me as an undergraduate professor at their study abroad campus in France right after I finished my master's program. So that was really cool. So I have professor experience, which is cool to be able to say as a new clinician in mental health. And then I just loved it so much. So I was like, I want more. I need more. I'm going to be a student of life for the rest of my life. And I'm starting in this doctoral program. So here we go.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that is so cool. Yeah, I'm a student of life, all the mysteries of the universe, I could just learn forever.
Yeah.
It almost is a problem for me. It's like, I might be a little bit autistic. I don't know, because I just, I have to know, and I just am so curious, but I love that. I love that you've really followed your heart there, because the fact that something is missing, I think that's a really big key. I think that's something that we all need to key in on and listen to, because it's, I think, really easy to just ignore that and just kind of go on. So good for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
not only ignore it, but invalidate it. Like tell yourself like, God, what's wrong with me? Or like, why can't I just be happy? Or like, what is my issue here? Why am I difficult? Or I hear that so much. And I often like shift it the other way. I'm like, I mean, sure, that's always a possibility that there's something going on with you, that you're unable to find happiness in your situation. But I almost think like more often than not, if you're having that like repetitive experience, it's that something's getting missed with that message from the soul. Like your purpose, your passion, you haven't discovered it yet. And that's okay. But your soul is like calling to you, like, hey, like there's something you're meant to do in this life, and I'm going to bother you until you get it right.
I love that. Yeah. It's on your website, Soul Shining. Like let it shine.
Yeah.
You know? I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say I actually came up with that name because I see my role in that process as a soul shiner, like a shoe shiner, but like a soul shiner. Like let me just help you get like some of the gunk off, so then you can like find it better and listen to it better and feel it clearer and etc. Anyway, sorry to cut you off.
No, I really like that as an analogy because I wouldn't have ever taken that angle on it. Like I just think of the soul shining, like just naturally, but I love the idea that it needs like a little bit of a buff, like my head, it's like, like the towel
like
going.
life gets gunky. We get some gunk on the soul, we fragment along our timelines.
Yeah.
Like things happen where like we get a little bit lost, and I think if we can just, the faster we all normalize normal to have shit happen. It's normal to go through the human experience, and it's all about the journey of coming back to you, coming back home, being whole in your vessel. So yeah,
that's really cool. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we would sell ourselves short if we didn't allow ourselves the freedom to explore whatever that is. That's that quiet little voice that down there that it's easy to suppress, but if you just allow it to speak, follow it, how it goes, follow that passion. That curiosity leads to passion, that passion leads to purpose. And then before you know it, I think a lot of the pain points too, or at least in my particular scenario, have led to, ways I can help other people, like I was so struggling. I struggled so hard. Like I said, I'm such a nerd that I just have like this compulsion. I have to know. And especially with like a purpose, it's like, I have to know what my purpose is. It became this like very demanding thing of the world, which doesn't help, to be honest, because that's all yang and no yin, like no energy to sort of let that cultivate. And I was focusing on one side of the breath, but not the other so much. But through all those pain points, I found a lot of tricks, tips, and tools to sort of help people, figure out like what their purpose is, with some different exercises and things like that. But I think your journey is really, really cool. I'd love to talk about, what you're working on, what your day-to-day is and your type of client as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people ask me like, what's the deal with the forgiveness coaching? Like, what's that all about? And I'm like, well, it's kind of cheating, to be honest, because forgiveness is rooted in everything. It's like, oh yeah, so you like work with clients who want to forgive something, someone, situation. I'm like, well, yeah, but forgiveness is really everything. And that's honestly even rooted in the work that I've done in addiction recovery for clients, because of the huge emphasis on the AA program, which is often rooted in making amends. And how are you making amends to free yourself? And that's really what it's all about, is like forgiveness is to free yourself. It doesn't have anything to do with the other person, because forgiveness is really for you. And I do find that a lot of people are confused around the topic of forgiveness. And forgiveness does not mean that you let people walk all over you, that like if somebody messes up, you give them another chance. or 2 chances or 3 chances. Like, forgiveness does not mean that you have to submit yourself to whatever hard stuff might be going on with the relationships around you. Forgiveness means that you get to pull away from looking at it at a microscopic level, and you pull away looking at it objectively. And you can do this with several different situations. Like, one easy one is having a conversation with that other person's inner child. So like, you pretend you as an adult or whatever age you're at, you're having a conversation with that person as an inner child, giving yourself insight to explore why they're doing what they're doing, how they're doing what they're doing. And it helps you recognize, like, we are all products of the system. We're all products of our environment. We are all doing the best we can with what we have. And we can do this exercise with not only people, but situations, forgiving circumstances, and then tapping into, what was my soul meant to learn from this? Like, asking yourself, like, if I talk to my highest version of me, whatever that looks like, what would that version of me say about this experience? And oftentimes it's something along the lines of, oh, well, we can forgive that person because they were a really important person in our journey to come home to ourself, right? Like, I went through hell, absolute hell, when I became a single mother before my daughter was even born. It was really, really hard. And what I got to learn from that experience was that all of that had to happen because that was me journeying home. And like, it's still a process. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm like self-actualized or anything like that, because I think that would be an incredibly audacious and not to mention boring to already be self-actualized at age 28. But what I will say is that, like, that process brought me home. And it's the journey of coming home is what life is all about, like exploring, you know, all these constructs and schemas that we pick up along the way, all these things of what we think. For example, as a 28-year-old woman, what I thought it was supposed to look like when I had my first child, what I dreamed my wedding would be and my husband would be, and like all these constructs that were quite literally chains, and making it so incredibly much more painful when it didn't happen that way. And so, you know, this is all part of that expansion into what we perceive as possible or real about us and our lives, which I think is the process of self-actualization.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't think we're ever done. The great work is never finished, as my friend Brandon says. And that's so true in my case. Like, it's like I keep learning, and you're going to keep learning over and over and over again. But I think it's really interesting, this sort of differentiation between the expectations and reality and coping with that. Like, can you talk a little bit about like that process and how you might, you know, guide someone through it?
Yeah, I mean, absolute first step is coming into acceptance, right? Radical acceptance. And there's a lot of people who talk about radical acceptance. And, you know, I think the most challenging part too is being really honest. Like, you have to be so honest with yourself. Like, wow, like, what is my ego really pissed off about right now? My ego is really pissed off because this doesn't look exactly how my 20-year-old self envisioned all of this to be. And that stems from my, you know, vision of what society taught me this is supposed to look like, and my mother taught me what this is supposed to look like, and my family had taught me what this is supposed to look like, right? So it's like, it's so many layers, and you have to be so honest, because there's a really powerful evolution that happens when you are able to look at your ego and recognize, like, oh wow, you're hurting, you're really wounded. You're really wounded, and you're like a child throwing a tantrum. Like, this did not go my way, you know? I am having a baby that I didn't plan on having, and I'm having to do it alone. This did not go my way. But the ego gets to have its day, gets to explain all of its frustration through radical acceptance and through radical honesty. Like, this sucks, right? But then recognizing, like, oh, like, but what is the purpose behind this? How can I shift from, oh my God, I'm a victim, this sucks, the ego's just like, bah, bah, you know? And then you shift it into like the soul talking or the higher self, whatever word you want to use.
Sure.
Or God, like, or whatever perspective you follow. But then the soul's talking, right? At least from my view. And it's like, oh, wait, but this is actually your greatest evolution ever. In fact, you are going to become the most powerful version of yourself that you've ever known or imagined could be ever possible. It's like, oh my God, like, geez, I didn't know that all had to happen for me to get to this point. But like, actually, yeah. And that's part of what it's all about. So, and like the really great part too, is that you don't have to do it alone. That like, that's what all people in personal development, healers, mental health professionals, coaches, like that's what we're all doing, is we're all guides to guide you through the human experience. So you don't have to feel so alone in it. And you can also have someone help you listen to the ego, because the ego can be kind of confusing, and it can sometimes confuse you on who's talking and like where that's stemming from. And it's important to know what actually the ego is saying to be able to understand, okay, you know, I'm just freaking wounded right now. Is it fair? No. Is it right? Not necessarily. But was it fucking meant to happen? Yeah, probably, you know? So
I love that perspective where you can say, yeah, this sucks. And I think that's what makes you unfuckwithable, is where you're like, you know what? Yeah, this sucks. Like we were talking about before, it's like we went from like a train wreck to a dumpster fire, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? You can totally just like, what is that little dog on the meme, you know, with the fire behind him? This is fine, you know, like kind of thing. And it's like, you kind of have to be able to allow yourself to have that perspective. If you can laugh at it too, then I think that minimizes it. But I think that's really, really cool. And a really cool way to sort of guide someone through that process. First of all, you know, get it out and then accept it, and then forgiveness. Like, I think I heard some like Hermetic guy talking about like how whenever somebody does something to you karmically, like you know, that's negative, then you can absorb that charge. And if you hold on to it, then you are holding on to it, and it's literally making your body sick. But once you can let go of it and forgive, then it's gone, and karma can actually do its work. Maybe like a lot of the reasons why karma, we're like, damn you, karma, why didn't you, you know, I want some Schadenfreude, you know, like, where you at, karma? I thought we were bros or whatever, right? Yeah. But like, yeah, I think a lot of the time, I don't know if that necessarily would work if you were like, you know, looking from the Schadenfreude sort of perspective, then that's not real forgiveness. But like, but when we let that stuff truly go, then karma will do its work. And I think there's some truth there, you know, and that's maybe an interesting way to think about it, right? From this like energetic, you know, from some dude who wears a cape and casts spells, you know, that's like his.
Yes. Yeah. That's like such an interesting concept that you just like sparked my wheels turning on. That is like, you know, that wouldn't be true karma if you like, or true forgiveness if you like kind of wanted karma to like get some back that's like done you wrong or whatever. I think about this a lot. Like, God, you know, like you're right. That technically I don't think would be true forgiveness, because like, although like I do want to say, like, just because you forgive someone doesn't mean you're not allowed to like be pissed. Like, doesn't mean you're not allowed to like, you know, but it's true that it's important where the energy of that karma is directed. Like, are you holding on to it? Are you sending it back to that other person, like, or situation or thing, like could come in many forms. But
well, if you're cheering for someone's demise, you know, like rah-rahing them to suffer, and you're like, you know,
that's not of light.
Right.
That is not of white light.
Right. If you're like, I hope you slip on a banana peel and fracture your hip, then you're not really forgiving yet. It's okay. That's maybe part of the process.
Maybe it is. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, totally. Totally.
It's a thing, but I think that's really,
Yeah.
really cool. That's a great angle too. And to just be that real and that raw and honest with people is refreshing, and I think really needed, because there's a tendency, I think, especially in the new age movement, to sort of
Mhm.
do what they call toxic positivity and like pretend like,
Oh God,
you
I
know,
know.
and bury
I'm
trauma.
so anti that. I think it's really problematic. Actually, so I'm taking a break from social media, but like if anyone wanted to see some of my posts from social media, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I can definitely see why she resents toxic positivity." Literally everything I write about, post about, it is so real and honest. It's like, wow, that was probably too honest, just like all the inner thoughts of like, this is why this hurts, and I thought so much about this that I'm going to share it with you, of like why I think this part hurts particularly a lot, or like why this part is particularly painful, or I'm always talking about like the hard stuff. Like I'm always talking about like, this is the truth of it. Like I'm not going to mask any of it, and yeah, I think the toxic positivity really hinders us in our growth, because it's like, if you're sitting there saying that like all is good, okay, I have met a couple people that I'm like, wow, legitimately, I think like you're so golden, like you're good, at least for now, like But I think if most people, if they sit there and say that, I think there's definitely an element of denial, like, oh, I'm good, like I'm just gonna like get through this in a like really happy way or something. And it's like, well, I mean, there's definitely something to be said for the ability to do that, but is it really sustainable across all situations? Like even death? Like, are you gonna like be like that when someone you love dies? Like that's like an ultimate test of your like toxic positivity. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm gonna be in the face of the ultimate end and I'm still gonna be like, oh, this is the bright side, or whatever it is. Like
I'm a star
it's
seed.
you know,
It's okay.
like
I'm a star seed. I just got a channeled message from 12D Pleiadian Galactic Federation ship, and everything's gonna be just fine. Just be present.
yes, yes, because then what are you doing? You're actually denying the true human experience. The true human experience is that we don't want our loved ones to leave. We fear death. It's natural to fear death. It's natural to wonder what happens after the abyss. And then there's an element of resilience around grieving our loved ones and loss. But there's an element of resilience. Like, okay, so I'm going to feel all of this, literally take in these emotions, spit them back out, and then move on forward in the life while integrating these emotions that I felt. Because I think toxic positivity even offers us the opportunity to numb a bit. It's kind of like that switch that you can flip, which I think is actually very, very problematic.
Yes, and I'm just having a thought right now. I have to write it down. But I think one thing that gets left
Love it.
out in with a lot of this type of thinking is you've got to go through the 5 stages of grief. You can't just skip that. Like, and a lot of people, even though I think
Mm-mm.
we mostly learned it in school, I think I learned it in school. Maybe it was psychology
Mhm.
class. I'm not sure where I picked it up. I'm pretty sure it was like psychology class, but it's always stuck with me, the 5 stages of grief, and like how
Yeah,
annoying bargaining is, right? Like I've
yeah,
I've
yeah.
I've had my paradigm smashed and then had to build a new one of quite a few times by this point. And every single time that I sort of metamorphosize, there's this destruction of everything that I thought the world was, which is mortifying in the moment, but that's part of growth. And
Yes.
so like through,
Yeah.
we've got to get to acceptance. Then you really do have to, hoe that road of what is like, I'm trying to remember all of the steps now. First is denial, then it's anger, then it's bargaining, I think. Well, maybe bargaining's fourth, and then finally acceptance. So I might be skipping one, but off the top of my head, I just I think it's really important to like you said, to be a human and experience things the way that we naturally do. That's okay, and in fact, it should be encouraged.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing talking about the cycle of grief is that it's not linear, it's cyclical. And you actually don't like go from like, okay, denial, anger. I'm trying to remember the sequence as well, but
Oh, it's depression. We're missing depression. That's the one. Yeah, it's
okay, yes.
denial. It's denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and finally acceptance. Or maybe I have. Yeah, I think I have it.
Yeah, it's not like you go from like one to the other and then move on through, and you can just like, don't skip any of them, but just like go on through and then you'll be great. Actually, what happens is like you kind of teeter in between, like, and like sometimes you'll go all the way, you'll go all the way back at the top, you'll go all the way back at the front, like, woo, oh, we're going back over. It's like, that ride, the dragon ride at like,
the sea dragon or something.
Garden. Yeah, it's like that, you're like, beep, beep, and that's just part of it, and
that's so good. That's a really, really good observation. Yeah, that's exactly right. Because you're like depressed, and then you get angry again, and you start like huffing and puffing, and then you're like, well, then you start bargaining again, the most annoying of the steps, and then maybe you get depressed some more, and then you get angry some more, and then you go into denial a little bit more, like, nah, it's not real. You're exactly right. It's not like a linear process where you go through each one of those. It really like this thing where you go sort of in and back. It's
yeah. And like, I think that helped. I think everybody should be educated about the cycle of grief, though, like having a general understanding of how it works and how, I think one of the most important things I've learned about grief work in my clinical training is it's all about integration. How do you continue to honor the memory or honor the existence of somebody who has passed, maybe a loved one that has passed, after they are no longer there? Because a lot of people, I think, have an overemphasis on like moving on after grief, like moving forward with their lives, moving on, figuring out how to move on without that person. But I don't think there's enough emphasis on how do you integrate the memory of someone in your daily practice. So it's a different way of thinking about it, in that you don't have to just go on your life and like pretend like they never existed, or just like try to get through your day without that person being there. It's more about how do you honor who they were, what they represented to you, what their life meant, in your day-to-day practices.
That's really good. Yeah, I really like that a lot. That's such a good observation, because I know it to be true from my own experience. And so I have thought about those, levels of grief. And it's so funny because like the seesaw, man. I mean, that's so good. I love that observation, because it's so real for me.
God, I'm glad that resonates. I hope that resonates with other people too.
I'm sure that it will. It's just something to keep in mind, for people out there, that it's okay. It's okay to be human, have a human experience. I think a lot of times we sweep that under the rug and make it, like ugly or something. And it's like, no, that's the beauty right there. That's the gold.
Yeah.
And why we're here, to really allow ourselves to be that vulnerable and have that experience. I find that that's really the way that people wind up connecting more, and if you can be comfortable opening up like that, then that might make you kind of unfuckwithable, I'm just gonna say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And not to mention, like, I think something that a lot of people forget about in thinking about intimacy is that actually when you show your truth, you are giving people, either consciously or unconsciously, the permission to be their most authentic self. So like what I noticed when I started sharing on my social media account, like the experience of becoming a single mother, the experience of evolving in who I thought I was supposed to be, or what I was supposed to have, or how that was supposed to look, into what I am now, I was receiving so much really authentic, genuine conversation and reception around what I was sharing. And I was surprised, because I'm like, this is not sugarcoating it. This is not all like rainbows and ponies. Like, this is not always beautiful. It's messy. And I was surprised to see that it was so well received, particularly by people who are craving that authenticity in their life, in their relationships, in their friendships. And it gave them subconscious permission or conscious permission to to say like, hey, thank you for showing up in this authentic way. This is how I'm showing up in my authentic way. And like, honestly, like that's the most important thing that anybody could ever learn in their entire life, is how to unlearn all the things that happened to us growing up that tell us that we're not allowed to be our most authentic self, our truest self, or even what that is. That is the goal of, I think, the human life, is like figuring out how to be in your most authentic self, even though you've had X amount of years of the system, people, places, things telling you you have to be, you have to act, you have to experience, you have to have all of XYZ, you know?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. I think that's an awesome spot to move, because I know you've got to, you're working, so you got to work, and that's cool. But
Yeah.
I really enjoy our conversations.
Me
and
too.
We'll stay in touch for sure. I just want to remind everybody where they can find you, Arianna Zabriskie, .com. And is there anything else you want to share? I know you're off of social media, but I'll go ahead and show your website one more time.
Thank
Is there
you. Yeah, for any coaches wanting to learn how to become an unfuckwithable coach from me, you can go to my website, and at the top there's a link for unfuckwithable coaches. And you can connect with me, ariannazabriskie@gmail.com. I am temporarily out from social media. I'm doing a cleanse, but okay, what's the date today? February 2nd. So like maybe in another 30 to 60 days, I will be February 2nd, 2021. Maybe in another 30 to 60 days from now, I'll probably be back on. And all my social media is all Arianna Zabriskie. So I'm incredibly easy to find.
Cool.
So I look forward to connecting with anybody who feels called.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'll be sure to put all those links as well in the show notes, and I'm going to follow you on all the socials so that when you do come back from your cleanse and enjoy it, you deserve it. Then I'll be one of your followers. I'll be liking and sharing all your stuff. So.
Yay! Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn to start. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to figure out what my password is. I haven't been on there in a hot minute.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know. I'm trying to be hip, working TV and film or whatever.
Yeah,
so I've been on Instagram mostly, but I'll find you on there for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, by
cool.
the time you get back on social media, I'll figure out what my password is. It'll be perfect universal timing.
Awesome. I can't wait. Can't wait.
Thank you so very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be in touch. We'll do it again.
Okay, sounds good.
All
Thanks.
right.